Shalom. This is YouTube channel Israel Reclaiming the Birthright, lesson 38. So right now we're in a situation where we see that Donald Trump made a deal which is rather dangerous for not only Israel but everybody else, frankly. It will leave the Iranian regime intact and they're honor bound to keep the deal. Truthfully, I don't think that Donald Trump is stupid. I think he's a good man, and he understands that rather than let America get destroyed by the crazy Islamo-leaning, leftist, suicidal Democratic Party, he has to ensure that the entire Republican base is going to vote properly in the midterm elections and keep the Republican Party intact. So that I believe is a strategy, and unfortunately there are casualties for that consideration, and I'm really sorry for the Iranian people, even more than my own. But nevertheless, after the midterm elections, I expect a change. But not being a prophet or anything like that, I just want to talk about what's going on, American history, 250 years of it, and beyond, and its relationship with Israel. So let's begin. Abraham's son Yitzhak had a wife who became pregnant with two males. Their names ended up being called Esav because he was firstborn, and Yaakov. And she was in such turmoil during that pregnancy that she went to find out from, I guess, a seer or a prophet what was going on. And she was told that there were two peoples fighting in her belly, and that the older one would serve the younger, meaning in the future, the older brother Esav, who wanted to kill Yaakov, would end up serving him. So Isser Weisberg and Mendel Kessin and other sagacious thinkers see Donald Trump as the embodiment or the reincarnation of Esav. And in truth, Donald Trump did more than any American president to help the people of Israel. And I love him for that. But there's a proverb, I forgot the exact one, it's either 12:1 or 21:1. The king's heart is like a water course in God's hand, who moves it whichever way is desirable to God. So this is what we could consider is happening on another level, in another dimension in Donald Trump's dynamic now. And you have to understand also that America could actually deliver a resounding long-term peace in the Middle East. The question is, have the people of Israel deserved it? And as we've discussed before, fulfilling rabbinic law is, the oral Torah, everyone should know is a fraud. And the rabbis will never do a process evaluation to see how bad the results of this fraud was. But the Hebrew Bible has about 24 verses saying that it's forbidden to add or subtract from God's law. And we talked about the original sin and all that. You're familiar with this. Anyway, so the point is that for Israel to have the peace and the plenty and the relaxation that we look for, they have to do not the rabbinic tshuva, but a godly tshuva, a godly repentance, one that pleases God. And for you people who are planning to sacrifice animals and, on the Temple Mount, get it out of your head. The sacrifices are your tainted appetites and addictions, all of them, for the one appetite of pleasing God. And we've talked about this. I don't want to repeat it now. Anyway, so that's where Israel stands. Now, if we do this, And Isser Weitzberg, who made the calculation from Daniel 2 and the date that the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built, 691 or 692, his calculation is that the Mashiach will come either this year or next year. I pray that that's true, and that God's mercy, which is promised, will allow us to survive without the terrible prophecies of Isaiah 6:13, Zechariah 13:8, Hosea 3:7, Jeremiah 54. Our people, all of us, the so-called enlightened liberal atheists, the Chilonim, and the Jews who are, from modern Orthodox to Haredi, are going to have to get it into their heads that they have to change and to please God. And they need to spend their time in synagogues figuring it out by reading the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, what God really wants and who He is and who they are, actually. We discussed this. Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmutenu, let us make God in our, let us make man in our image, actually means we, the masculine aspect, the zachar, the ruach, and the feminine aspect, the nekevah, the shekhinah, the presence, are making man in their image, male and female. So we have to learn what our God is, who our God is, and what He wants, or what they want. Anyway, so moving on, we've established a need, an existential requirement for some repentance that pleases God, and I hope you do it. Now I want to talk a little bit about the history of America, who runs America, and we'll talk about anti-Semitism and who the culprits are and still are, or were in the past. Anyway, America, didn't just happen. Chaim Weizman came to America in 1740. You can say a lot of things. He was fleeing pogroms in Europe, and his father sent him to England to learn how to do financing, and then he went to America and stuff like that. All this is true. You need to arm yourself so that you can do the job that you're chosen to do. And anyway, he, in my opinion, created the American Revolution, and without him, it could not have happened. He owns America, and we never paid him back. He died in poverty. His heirs are still waiting. Anyway, so America was selected by God to be the godfather, let's say, of the new state of Israel. And it didn't go easy, because in America there were a preponderance of German settlers who settled in the 17th century. They occupied land near the Cherokee Indians in the Carolinas. They wanted to get rid of them. They managed to get Andrew Jackson into the White House. There was a Supreme Court hearing that said that the Cherokee could stay. Andrew Jackson was obedient to his masters, and he got rid of them. He marched them 2,000 miles on the Trail of Tears, killing as many as possible. And you have to think, what would America be like without that German influence, without that, especially working with people like the Indians, basically good-hearted people? It would be a different place. It would be a really nice place, a lot nicer. Because what happened with these German settlers? First of all, they didn't want the revolution. They joined their Hessian brethren to fight on the side of the British. They were monarchists, and when the British, whom they were sure would reconquer America in the War of 1812, lost. These monarchists had the German school of the German Rational School of Professors in Frankfurt reestablish atheism, and that was in 1820. So it spread through Europe and got to America, and we know the history. We can look it up. There was a trial, the Scopes monkey trial, in 1926, and what's his name? Anyway, the one who represented creationism didn't read Darwin's doubt. Darwin had a doubt because the Precambrian fossil record shows all the animals that we know today existing back then in the same form. No little tiny horse evolving into a big horse. If I can't think of his name. If he had read that and represented the creationism properly, I think America would not have been teaching evolution and the false premise that there is no God. And it's a tragedy. He was a corpulent man. He died a couple of weeks later, and it's too bad. Nevertheless, this is where we are. People think that the idea of religion, Jewish religion, chosen people, Bible, all this stuff, they can't believe it. And we discussed why that's conceivable, because the religion that the priests and the pastors are better, I think, and the rabbis give us is a religion that is on its face illegal because of the additions and substitutions. But they tell us that if you listen to them, God will bless you, and that if you get cursed or if there's terrible things that happen in the world, it's God testing us. There's an old story, we've discussed it. Anyway, but the thing is, you Israelis now, more than anybody, have to accept responsibility for sacrificing your material appetites and cravings and addictions for the one appetite of making our God happy, and consequently enjoying his happiness or their happiness with us. All the things that we crave, that we sacrifice for to get and to earn and have more of this and more of that, all of these are actually blessings which a well-pleased God wants to give us, because he is love. They are love. That's why the name is Yahava. Ahava is love in Hebrew. Anyway, so this is now the prophecy coming out of the Bible into reality, and all of the consequences and responsibilities are before us. And there are diehard Chabadniks that believe the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I love him. We talked about this. His biography by Talushkin says that it's even forbidden to think of the Holocaust as a punishment. Listen, Samson Raphael Hirsch has it right. History is God's judgment. So let's get real and let's do what God wants, and then we'll have the things that we want as a blessing. And as it says in Parshat Balak, no one will see Amal, toil in Israel. All those things that we toil for will be benefits, blessings accrue to us because we finally made God happy and earned his blessings, which they want to give us. Anyway, so I hope we do that. Anyway, back to the history of America. The way the Wild West happened, we have to understand that we have people that really controlled America. There was a concerted group, and they wanted people to subjugate and to feed off of and stuff. So they opened up the Louisiana territory for settlement, and people could come to America. And if you took whatever it was, 100 acres, and and you'd own it if you farmed it, stuff like that. It was really great, So, but at the same time, you didn't have Jews in there yet. They stayed pretty much to the east. These families that ran things, they knew where to go to get what they wanted from all these new settlers, whether you were a prospector or a farmer or whatever. Like what's his name, the comedian? There's a sucker born every day. That's his name. Anyway, so there was no morality amongst these people. They swindled people, and they could pay Indians and sell them guns to terrorize places that they wanted to see vacated if there was oil or whatever there. This is a known thing, and we see that these families are still in control. By the time Jews started coming to Israel, because these same culprits assassinated Tsar Alexander II for having freed his serfs, his slaves, and created a pogrom in 1981, and Jewish professors who saw their compatriots take part in the pogroms against them, they moved to Israel, rolled up their sleeves, got their fingers dirty, learned how to fight and dig and farm, and they became the atheistic backbone of Israel. And if you read Avram Yitzhak Cohen Cook, he understood that the desiccation of European Judah didn't give God any choice. You didn't get people who were willing to pick up and go. The Gaon of Vilna in about 1790 said it's time to go back to Israel. So his chief student, David Cohen, opened up 60 yeshivas. They couldn't move. And you had Yitzhak Reines of the Mizrahi movement, and they couldn't get it done either. So God co-opted the diehard atheists, and he made them establish the state of Israel. And Cook understood that in time they would become purified. Well, a lot of time has gone by since he was the first pre-state rabbi of Israel, back in the 30s. It's time now to get going, and if you don't do it, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. And it'll be so good. I have sometimes thought that Jews are committing Moloch worship, ensuring that God cries because we guarantee the sacrifice of our children, because we will not do the simple things that God asks to please him and her and release those blessings to us, including peace. So let's wake up and shake a leg and get moving. Anyway, so going back to America, in the East, you had the Dutch, and then they were taken over by the English, 1624, on, and then finally there was problems in Ireland, and the city that had no police force at the time that the Irish came in from Ireland suddenly realized, hey, what happened? We need a police force. Then the same people that they got the police force to police, they became the police. Anyway, the city of New York is amazing, but the most amazing thing is the Jews of the city of New York. We gave a whole new ambience to the city that would have been, full of strife and, political shenanigans and robberies and thefts and taking advantage of the taxpayer and all this stuff. And it would have been dry with no enjoyment. Jews brought enjoyment. Take a look at Broadway. Go ahead and copy and cut everything that Jews brought to New York, and you'll see what it looks like, okay? And for those of you who elected Mamdani, this is Mamdani's dream. A dry, arid, Jewless, infidel as ultimately New York City, at the head of the Western Caliphate. I don't know how they voted for him. Anyway, so let's go to the history of Iran. The Iranian people had a president in 1953, Mohamed Mossadegh, who was deposed by Theodore Roosevelt's grandson, FDR's nephew, Kermit Roosevelt, a CIA operative, who with $1 million staged a coup, and suddenly the Shah became the ruler of Iran. And the reason this was done is because these people never wanted Israel to become a state, and they thought they didn't have anything to worry about at the UN vote in November 29th, 1947, because neither Truman or Stalin were going to vote for partition and the establishment of the State of Israel. David Ben-Gurion blackmailed both these presidents, and one regarding spies of the Soviets like Al Jahis in the White House, and the other about Operation Paperclip, the Bush family banks in Holland and America for Nazi plunder, Operation Paperclip, swirling Nazis through the Vatican into America and elsewhere, South America. Remember the boys of Brazil? That's where Adolph Hitler hid in Argentina. Anyway, so we understand that the powers that be didn't plan for there to be a state of Israel. But because there was an arms embargo on Israel, they figured, all right, the Arabs will destroy them, especially the British, the Jordanian Legion that was trained by the British. Anyway, it didn't work out that way. We lost 6,000 people, unfortunately, but there was a state of Israel. And then they tried again. There was the issue of the 56 war, which Israel performed valiantly, amazingly, but even Dwight Eisenhower couldn't let that stand, so he reversed that victory. And then in 67, the French were going to embargo Israel from getting more weapons if they made a preemptive strike, because all these Arabs, for a couple of months, they blocked the Bab el-Mandeb at the bottom of the Red Sea. They were singing songs about Jewish children's blood running in the street and all this kind of stuff. They told the people living in the western part, the West Bank, to just go away for a little while, and when we destroy all the Jews, you come back and take everything they own and reoccupy your own places. Anyway, to make sure that this would happen, the CIA planted the USS Liberty right beside Egypt, giving Egypt the positions that Israel's armored corps vacated in the Sinai after conquering the Egyptians, so that they could take that equipment up to the Syrian front and beat them. When Israel saw what was going on, they did a quick scan of the ship, found the most vulnerable place that would hurt the minimum amount of sailors, and they blew it up. Of course, it was called a mistake, but we know what it was. This is America's Nazis doing their job. I mean, they made Hitler. Rockefeller helped. It's not a secret. The Zyklon B gas, Henry Ford, who had his Dearborn Independent, citing his hatred of Jews, he actually got a medal from Hitler, and he should have, because he had the contract to build the Sherman tank and the Spitfire, and we talked about this. He sabotaged both of them, in short, because I don't want to get into the whole thing all over again. But Donald Trump knows that these people they defeated America. America defeated the Germans, but the Nazis defeated America, and they're still defeating. So anyway, after 1953, they had to let time go on so nobody notices. Iraq was a problem. In time to jump forward, there had to be a reason for the Bush family to go after Saddam Hussein, and they did. They blamed him for the trade center, which was ridiculous because everyone trained in Tehran, not Baghdad. But Iraq would have defeated Iran and slowed down the process of destroying Israel by the new Iranian regime that Jimmy Carter was instructed to install when he took out the Shah in 1979. Okay, so these Ayatollahs were being helped by the removal of the Iraqi regime. Remember, there was a war when they got in. They had the 45 American hostages, whatever, until Reagan got elected. The Iranians sent 500,000 children with little tiny Qurans around their neck to clear the minefields. This is who Donald Trump is helping? I don't think so. I think he's better than that. Anyway, but we got rid of Iraq, and then fast forward to Obama bringing pallets of billions of dollars for the Iranians to finance their terror proxies around the world, especially Hezbollah, Hamas, the Arafat's creatures in the West Bank, and the Houthis and people around the world. And then you had Biden, who let everybody and all the terrorists that were financed by Iran and China and whatever get into the country, and they're just waiting for orders. I mean, look what happened at the White House just now. What do you think? That just happened? There's a wild American Indian or a wild, Southern Baptist who suddenly organizes something like that? No, these are here because we let them in. Biden let them in. This is why Donald Trump is going to sacrifice anything rather than let Democrats get into the Congress. Anyway, so we have a situation where right now Iran will quickly rebuild everything, and they know that their days are numbered. They may know that they understand Trump. They know what's going on. They have a good 60 days to fight for their life, which means if they don't destroy Israel real quick, they're gone, because that's what's going to happen. So they're rebuilding, they're rearming, they're repositioning stuff. Of course, China's going to try to get their anti-aircraft systems in, the same with Putin and all. Okay, but the IDF isn't sleeping anymore, I don't think. So this is where we stand today. And for us simple Jews who live outside the country and in the country and are like, what can we do? We don't have any power. What we need to do is actually spend time in our synagogues and flesh out, using the Hebrew Bible. And you Christians need to do what Jesus would have you do, because he's a Jew. Flesh out the vision of God in Parshat Balak, in Numbers 23 and 24 especially. Who we are. If we're commanded to love God, then everything we do with our hands, look at with our eyes, feel with our hearts, do with all our intent and activities, has to be something that pleases God first and foremost, period. Then, as it says, the goodly tents of Jacob, the sanctuaries of Israel, when Jacob rises in consciousness to please God and make God his ruler, then our homes are like sanctuaries, because we become real holy. We are totally in the service of pleasing God and enjoying his pleasure with us. This is the Truat El, the trumpet blast of God, which is mentioned in 3 places in the Bible and in Parshat Balak. So we have a people who so pleases God, so sacrifices all our appetites and cravings and things to please God, that one appetite that surpasses everything and brings us a life with no amal, no toil, and all the things that we want, that we struggle for, become byproducts of pleasing God. The quality of life, everything, the food you eat, the people you associate with, the quality of your homes, etc., etc. And there's peace, finally. But Israel has to remember, and I'm sure Christians remember too, Deuteronomy 25:17 is a command, excuse me, Deuteronomy 25:17 is a command for Israel to remember, Zachor, to obliterate the memory of Amalek from under heaven. So any God-fearing, God-loving, brother-loving person has to be on board with that. Anyway, I hope we all do our part, and quickly. Have a nice day.